Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, highly opinionated source that literally breaks down 1,400 years of Islamic history just to deliver a razor-sharp critique of the modern Iranian regime. We've put together a completely covered, highly cinematic visual summary for you so you can grasp exactly what this source is arguing without getting lost in the weeds. It's a huge topic, but hey, we've mapped the whole thing out. We've got a pretty clear journey ahead. We'll start with the roots of division, look at the specific sects of Shia Islam, see how scholars took authority, dive into the weaponization of religious prophecy, and wrap up with the source's bold counterclaim. Let's get to it! Part 1. The Roots of Division. Okay, to really get what this source is arguing about modern Iran, we have to start with the sheer scale of the global Muslim population. Look at this demographic reality. Out of roughly 2 billion Muslims worldwide, you've got about 85% who are Sunni and 15% who are Shia. Now, while they definitely share the core pillars of the faith, the source argues they are deeply, fundamentally divided on one massive concept, and that's governance. So what's actually at the heart of this split? Well, according to the material we're analyzing, it all goes back to a massive succession crisis right after the Prophet Muhammad's death. You've got the Sunni belief on one hand, arguing that direct divine intervention basically ended there, making the Quran and the Prophet's teachings completely sufficient. But on the flip side, the Shia belief says, no, ongoing divine intervention is absolutely required. They believe you need a living, divinely appointed imam to guide the people. Moving on to Section 2, Sects of Shia Islam. Now, what's totally fascinating here is how that 15% Shia population fragmented even further over the centuries. It wasn't just a clean break, it was a whole series of branching paths. The source maps out a timeline driven by constant succession disputes. Starting from 632 CE with the Prophet's death, things splinter. By 740, you get the Zaydis, who believe an imam literally has to rise up against tyranny. Fast forward to 765, the Ismailis branch off to follow a visible living imam from a specific family line. And finally, by 874, the Twelvers emerge, and their big thing is that they are waiting for a hidden 12th imam to return. And here is the absolute vital statistic. Almost 92% of Shia today are Twelvers. Let that sink in for a second. That means the vast majority of the Shia world, which absolutely includes the modern state of Iran, are waiting for a hidden 12th imam, the Mahdi, to return. The Ismailis and Zaydis, they make up just about 4% each. So the dominant political force in this region is literally built around a leader who isn't physically there. Which brings us to Part 3. The scholars take authority. Right, so think about it. What happens to geopolitical power when the ultimate leader you're waiting for has been hidden for centuries? Well, somebody's got to fill that massive power vacuum. The source argues that Twelver scholars systematically stepped in and essentially usurped ultimate authority, doing it in 3 main steps. First, they claimed to be the direct inheritors of the prophets. Second, they started mandating strict obedience to themselves. And third, they adopted divine titles, like calling themselves Ayatollah, which literally means sign of God, basically deifying themselves in the eyes of everyday believers. And all of this culminates in a concept called Wilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. If you've ever wondered how modern Iran's government actually functions, this is your blueprint. The source claims this doctrine was the ultimate tool. It allowed scholars to level up from mere religious teachers to figures holding absolute, supreme political and spiritual authority. They built an entire state apparatus, claiming they were just preparing the way for the Mahdi, while effectively seizing total control for themselves. Section 4. Weaponizing religious prophecy. Now, we hit the core accusation of the source material. They claim the Iranian regime didn't just grab political power. They actively and deliberately weaponized ancient text to keep an iron grip on the masses. The narrator points to pamphlets heavily circulated in the region with quotes like, "A man from Qom will emerge calling people to the truth. Winds and storms will not shake them. The final victory belongs to the righteous." And the kicker? The source shows how the regime took this exact ancient prophecy and pinned it directly on Ayatollah Khomeini, legitimizing his 1979 revolution as a preordained divine event. But wait, it doesn't stop with Khomeini. The source argues the regime systematically assigned these wild, apocalyptic roles to modern leaders just to demand unquestioning loyalty. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, they labeled him the Khorassani, the guy preparing the way. Former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was cast as Shu'aid bin Salih, the commander of the forces. Even former Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was framed as the Yamani, an infallible forerunner.
It's wild. They basically elevated politicians into prophesied messianic figures. What the source is outlining here is a massive psychological operation. By equating obedience to the state with divine duty, selectively editing hadiths, and actually labeling political militias as divine armies, the regime weaponizes religious guilt. It's incredibly effective. They frame any political resistance as a literal betrayal of God. This holds millions intellectually hostage and crushes dissent through pure psychological pressure. But here's where the source's argument gets brilliantly strategic. They take the regime's reliance on ancient text and flip it right back at them. They cite specific hadiths, like this one. The worst scholars of my community are those who lead people away from us. From them, fitna comes out, and to them it returns. The narrator uses these exact texts to argue that the religious scholars of the end times, pointing a giant finger directly at the current regime's clerics, would actually be the ultimate deceivers.
Finally, Part 5, the source's counterclaim. So who's actually making all these heavy accusations? Well, pivoting from critique to their own ideological solution, the speaker reveals they represent a group called the Ahmadi Religion of Peace and Light. They still believe in the 12 Imams, sure, but they say those are to be followed by 12 Mahdis. They claim their own legitimacy comes straight from the Prophet's written will, and most importantly, they absolutely and completely reject the authority of the 12 scholars running the Iranian state.
They boldly assert that their movement is literally the only one offering a truly divine system of rulership with a legitimate present successor. While everyone else stayed quiet or tried to negotiate, they claim they've been the only ones consistently warning people about the Iranian regime's propaganda. To them, they're the genuine alternative, completely separate from what they see as a corrupted scholarly establishment.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap up on. As long as religion and state are this deeply intertwined, how will the reinterpretation of ancient prophecies continue to shape, dictate, and honestly destabilize modern geopolitical power? When thousand-year-old texts are actively used to justify today's leaders and military moves, the stakes are just unimaginably high. Definitely something to keep in mind as you watch world events unfold. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep questioning the narratives behind the power.